tell me, how did you get in federal procurement and how did you end up so successful? Tell us about your progress.
Interesting story, probably very similar to a lot of people who get involved in this thing called government contracting. I fell into it. When I was growing up, there were no college degrees for government contracting. So when I graduated from college, I applied to a bunch of different jobs, and one came back as a contracts administrator. And I remember looking at it thinking, this is not in banking, this isn't in finance, which were my degrees were finance and economics, but I went with it. And kind of the long story short is that led me on a 30-year odyssey where I worked for companies bidding on contracts. And then I thought, I'd like to know what they do in the government when they're awarding contracts. So I jumped in the government in the early 1990s, and I spent 21 years in the federal government. My last pit stop was as DHS Chief Procurement Officer. So 30 years in the field of government contracting, very rewarding. I think at the highest level, the most interesting thing about government contracting, if you had to explain it to somebody, it's easy if you say, I'm a lawyer, I'm a doctor. But if you say you're in government contracting, people want to know a little bit more. And essentially it boils down to this. The government has about 5 million employees, and then they buy things. And they buy about $500 billion worth of stuff. And all that together is supposed to serve the American taxpayer. And so I was, for 30 years, involved in the buying of the $500 billion worth of things. My last stop, DHS Chief Procurement Officer, we were buying things to protect the country while adhering to all the federal policy and regulation.
So, Dr. Nayak, what is your take on veteran-owned businesses, veterans doing business with the federal government?
I think for all Americans, you would should say, we are deeply grateful for everyone who is in the military, and definitely for all veterans. There are classifications. There are veterans, then there are service-disabled veterans when it comes to contracting, and they have meaning. One of the nice things about our federal government and the contracting system is because it's taxpayer dollars that are spent giving contracts for people to do work for the government as a whole, all three branches have figured out, hey, we should probably spread this money around for the greater good of the totality of our community, one piece of which are veterans. And so what I've been involved with in terms of veterans is really kind of three things. One is at every agency I worked for, there was always a movement to hire more veterans. There are always goals to provide veteran-owned companies and service-disabled veteran-owned companies contracts. So I was always involved in that. And then finally, like probably a lot of people, you get involved in your own personal charities. I happen to enjoy the Wounded Warriors Project. I enjoy supporting that type of work.